today from different companies. We have speakers from Facebook. We have a speaker from NVIDIA. We have a speaker from Capital One, and we have a speaker from Caterpillar. Our first speaker of the day will be Elspeth Weeks, who is a software, this is wrong, who is an ISP architect at Facebook. She has been at her current position for a year before she was a software engineer at Google. And prior to that, she has been at Apple and has worked on many different notable projects. A fun fact about her is that she was the Illinois State debate champion, which I find super cool. Our second speaker will be Vibha Pandurangi, who is a software architect at NVIDIA and is currently on the hardware infrastructure team at NVIDIA. She was actually an intern who then transitioned into a full-time worker. And she is a UIUC alum, so she has been, she's familiar with UIUC and has been active at many different things at her time in at UIUC. So she is experienced with the different aspects of campus life and will be speaking on her transition from an intern at NVIDIA to being a full-time worker at NVIDIA. Our third speaker is Shivani Gupta, who is a software engineer at Capital One. And she is in the San Francisco office. So we have someone from a different part of the United States. She works on many different technologies within Capital One's systems and was involved in WCS Founders in Hack, Illinois. So she's also a UIUC alum. And last but not least, we have Ann Pita-Kyle, who is a senior digital analytics project leader at Caterpillar and cares very deeply about women in STEM and has been involved with the Society of Women Engineers and First Robotics. So we are so happy to have her speak today at Women in Tech as well. And these are our four speakers for today. And so without further ado, I will let Elspeth take it away with our first lightning talk of the day.
All right, thank you. Give me 1 second to get my screen share going. All right. Okay, so I guess first off, it's just a slide so you can check in, and this is how you can hear from Facebook recruiters if you're interested. I'll put it back up also at the end of my talk. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Elspeth Weeks. I am an ISP architect at Facebook. I was at UIUC from 2011 to 2015. And I've spent the last 6 years working mostly on smartphone cameras, and some of you might even have some of the cameras in your pockets. There is a part of me that wishes I could have actually gone to Champaign to participate in this event, since I haven't been there in 6 years and would love to see it. But I do remember what February in Illinois is like, so I'm pretty happy to be in California. So I'm just going to start by talking a little bit about what I do. So as I said, I'm an ISP architect, and in my case, ISP stands for Image Signal Processor. So what do? Well, about 40% of my time is spent prototyping imaging algorithms in Python. And I love this part of my job. It is so much fun because I get to spend time reading papers, implementing algorithms, and using some really fun math that just doesn't come up often in life. For this part of my job, I rely a lot on statistics and signal processing libraries like NumPy and SciPy. So another 40% of my job is spent optimizing the algorithm into low-level C code. This part of my job is also fun, but for a different reason. There's something super, super satisfying about shaving seconds off of code performance or using particularly clever hacks to eliminate the need for inner for loops. The last 20% of my job is this sort of miscellaneous category made up of meetings, emails, unit tests, doc reviews. And this part of my job is not fun. I do it because I have to do it. I guess a quick tip for everyone who maybe you've never had a job. Every job you will ever have is going to have this miscellaneous category of stuff that you don't really want to do. A fulfilling job is one where you love everything else about it, despite that stuff. Okay, so one thing that I think is really interesting about my job, which is in many ways my dream job, is that when I was your age, I didn't even know that this was a job that people did. I'm sure if I had been pressed, I could tell you that there were people who worked on cameras, obviously, but it wasn't top of mind that this was a viable career option. So I know this isn't going to work great in Zoom, but just a quick virtual poll. How many of you knew that you wanted to study engineering before you started your college applications? And I know I can't see any hands, so I'm just going to assume that there is some split between people who did know and people who didn't know. So for those of you who didn't know, don't worry, I also didn't. When I was in high school, I actually wanted to be a National Geographic photographer. I remember my dad got the magazine every month, and it seemed like the people who were responsible for the evocative photos just got to do such interesting things. And when I was in school, one of my early photography teachers had singled me out as having a good eye, so it didn't really seem that far-fetched. But obviously, I went in a different direction. So, how did I go from wanting to be a photographer to actually being an engineer? I'm sure some of you can relate, but I have fairly pragmatic parents. Photography and really all creative pursuits are not seen as sort of viable, realistic career paths. But since I was good at math and science, engineering actually made sense and seemed reasonable. I didn't really know much about engineering though. So when I was doing my applications, I picked mechanical engineering, mostly just because I was taking mechanics in school that semester. I remember writing my essay, which was sort of focused on how much I enjoyed building model cars as a child, which is so inauthentic because I think I did that one time and I only did it because I had to. Ironically, I feel my actual story, the one where I am so passionate about photography that I end up wanting to make amazing cameras, is actually a very compelling story, but I just didn't have sort of the vocabulary to know that that's what I wanted to do. Okay, so I go down to Champaign and I start meeting all these amazing, talented, driven people. Truly, the engineering students at UIUC are some of the most interesting people in the world. Just the student body is so passionate. Meanwhile, I feel like I'm just sitting there and I'm not passionate about anything. I remember being in a class and just thinking like, oh my gosh, I am so not passionate about TAM. What am I doing with my life? So with all the benefits of hindsight, I can see this thought process for what it really was. I just had a sort of naive paradigm about what school was for, all wrapped up in imposter syndrome. I know, or at least I can imagine, that barely anyone is really passionate about TAM. And that's not to say no one. I'm sure the TAM faculty is incredibly passionate about their subject, but most of the kids who go through those classes are doing it because it's just a tool for something else. Unfortunately, when I was 19, I just wasn't able to have that moment of realization that subjects taught in school are really just tools to be able to do other work. So I spent the next 3 years just mostly bouncing around fairly aimlessly. I feel like, throwing thing at a wall to see what sticks is a very good analogy for what I felt like I was doing. It wasn't until I think my senior year in college when I finally took computational photography that I finally felt like I found something that I was passionate about. And to say I found something is really incorrect because I already knew I was passionate about photography. So this was just rediscovering something I was passionate about and sort of finding an application for engineering with something that I actually felt strongly about. And this was a moment of clarity. I don't have a particularly strong love for statistics or signal processing or machine learning or computer science. All of these things are just tools in my toolbox so that I can pour myself into the thing that I do love, making great cameras. Obviously, taking a single class is not impetus enough for turning my whole life around. but the content of this class gave me enough drive that I knew what direction I had to go in. At this point in time, I still didn't know what an ISP architect was, but I knew enough to head in a direction where I could land a job on a camera image quality team. Luckily for me, as this team grew, so did the scope of the work, and soon enough, I had gone from being a SWE to doing ISP work. Obviously, telling the story like this, it sounds like it might have been easy or that it was bound to happen or inevitable, but trust me when I say it didn't always feel like that. There were plenty of bad days, there were plenty of bad weeks, but having my North Star, which is cameras and photography, makes every day sort of a clear focus on what I'm heading towards. And so that's, I think, my big suggestion for all of you is find your North Star so that when you're driving towards something, you know the direction you should go in and you can push full force ahead. For those of you who are passionate about cars or space or video games, I'm sure it's already very obvious to you what your engineering degree will do for you and how you can use it. But if you're passionate about music, record labels need engineers. If you're passionate about art, museums need engineers. If you're passionate about movies, media, I mean, Facebook was recently nominated for a couple Emmys, so the options are limitless. And for those of you who love sports, I think we all remember Moneyball starring Brad Pitt, which was a movie about a data scientist saving the Oakland A's. I will sort of end with this thought. In a very literal sense, I am not a National Geographic photographer yet, but I have poured hours of my life into the image quality of cameras that other photographers have used to get published in Nat Geo. And so I think that's pretty cool. All right, thank you.
All right, we now open to questions for Elspeth. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to just unmute and ask the question, or you can type it in the chat and I can relay the question. All right, so I mean, I had a question for you. I know you talked about your experience in college and how you were faced with just uncertainties with the major you had picked. So I wanted to sort of ask more about so any doubts and uncertainties you faced today in your current job and in positions in the past, and how that sort of led you to different positions that you currently hold or are considering moving on to in the future.
Sure. So currently, I really enjoy the work I'm doing. I really enjoy my team. I don't see any reason to move around at this current moment. But when I was back at Google, maybe you've heard, or perhaps it gets around, Google is like famous for reorgs. So there was a point where I did get not exactly reorged, but a very prominent person left. And so a reorg was like imminent in the future. And at that point, I like sort of knew writing is on the wall for this team, got to move. And I ended up moving into another position that wasn't really a great fit. And so I think, you know, it was good that I sort of realized that when I did, and you know, it didn't suck too much of my time or energy before I was able to move on and get this amazing opportunity at Facebook.
Thank you for that answer, Elspeth. We have another question in the comments. How did you learn more about the computational photography after you took the class about it?
Yeah, so I think one of the hard things about learning something, especially something that you maybe don't know about, is that you don't have the vocabulary to even begin searching for things. So at least fortunately from having that initial class, I was able to like, okay, now I know where to like start deep dives. And this is actually something, it was the first time I really felt like I was able to take something from school and like pursue it in like a passion project type way, where like I was just doing it or learning it because it was interesting to me, and not because I felt like I had to do it or it was homework or it was due, or just like everyone has a side project, so I've got to have one, but like I actually cared very deeply for it. I guess one thing that's kind of funny is before working at Facebook, my sister and I like together, we made like a small Python Instagram bot that would like pull images from Instagram and like, I don't know, do some image processing to see sort of like correlate likes and stuff with the images. Obviously it was not very sophisticated, but it was fun. And, you know, no one was paying me to do this, so it's just
cool. Very cool. Another question is, how did you sort of, or in what ways did you reach out to faculty or resources as a student to help sort of cultivate your passion and learn more about finding the intersection of your love for photography and engineering?
So I guess I'll have two parts to this. Is I didn't really realize that there was this intersection until I had taken the course. Once I had taken the course, I was more proactive, sort of. I think the professor is Professor Hoyam. I'm not sure if he's still there, but once I had taken the course, I would reach out to him to get more information or see if there was more sort of extra work I could take on. Prior to that, though, I was not as proactive as I should have been, certainly with my engineering classes. I did do a lot of French classes, though, which for a long time I found much more interesting than a lot of the engineering work. So I would reach out to some of the French professors for like doing some extra work, but I'm probably not a great example of proactivity during college.
All right, cool. Thank you for your talk, Elspeth, and we can move on to Viba's talk from NVIDIA. So, Viba, if you want to try.
Sounds good. Yeah, I can start sharing my screen. Cool. Is that working?
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Viva Pandurangi. I'm a new college grad who started my career at NVIDIA mid-pandemic last August. So today I'll be talking a little bit about what it was like graduating into a completely virtual workplace and then sharing 5 lessons that I learned from my internship at NVIDIA and then going on to start my full-time job there as well. So to tell you a little bit about myself, I studied computer science here at the University of Illinois and graduated last May. While I was on campus, I was the director of the Engineering Career Fair, as well as actively involved in Engineering Council, Theta Tau, and SWE. I interned for NVIDIA the summer after my junior year and came back to the same team in hardware infrastructure as a software architect. I get to work with a cool combination of both software and hardware, which is like pretty cool for me as a computer science major. And as a software architect, I work with my team to construct software solutions to gaps or problems that hardware teams are facing throughout their chip development process. So to tell you a little bit about NVIDIA, a phrase that permeates the NVIDIA community is do your life's work here. And from my experience so far, it is definitely true. NVIDIA is constantly evolving to tackle really important problems across a wide range of sectors, whether of the tech industry, whether that's self-driving cars or cloud and data centers or healthcare, or of course, gaming. NVIDIA has a wide range of opportunity to work in any of those sectors. And there's also, like I said, a really big focus on solving some of those important problems that exist in those areas. For example, NVIDIA GPUs power the study of molecules like the COVID-19 spike protein at research institutions by providing, and they also provide researchers and clinicians tools for GPU accelerated AI in medical imaging, drug discovery, smart hospitals. You can also see the use of NVIDIA GPUs in AI software for improving the environment and fighting against climate change. So you really do have the opportunity to do your life's work here. And that's actually one of the reasons that I came back to NVIDIA after my internship for full-time, was that I got to see the breadth and depth of opportunities here at the company, as well as the impact of NVIDIA's work in helping solve these pressing problems that I saw every day. And teams at NVIDIA have a really open culture. They talk to one another, and internal transfers are encouraged throughout the duration of your career. So I knew I would never be lacking any opportunities to learn something new. So that's why I decided to come back. And from that, I have 5 lessons that I'd like to share with all of you. So the first lesson is to set up coffee chats. In a virtual world, especially, it can be challenging to get to know your team, let alone the people outside of your team. So start with your team and your manager and set up time with them to chat. This might be a one-on-one meeting, but it might not. You may have to ask for a separate coffee chat outside of your one-on-one with your manager. Use this as an opportunity to talk about the big picture rather than about your project specifically. Ask questions about how your team fits into the larger organization. That was one of the most important things that I understood last summer. But I also encourage you to ask questions about the person that you're talking to, about their career, about their role at work, what that entails, how they got there. You can also talk about your interests interwoven throughout that conversation and what you're hoping to learn and get out of your internship or the first year of your job. For example, to share a little personal anecdote, during my coffee chat with my manager, I talked about how I was really interested in working in the healthcare industry somewhere down the line. And hearing this, he actually set me up with a coffee chat with one of the project managers in the healthcare organization at NVIDIA. And he also set up another coffee chat for me with the head of the Women in Tech Club at NVIDIA. And through these two coffee chats, I got to know not only about what their roles encompass, but also to build a chain of coffee chats. So they recommended some other women engineers for me to talk to. And I kind of built a chain of coffee chats through this. And it went from not only software engineering, but also the VP of the org that I work for right now. So I got to meet a lot of really cool and intelligent people, see what they were up to and how they got there, which was a really, really enriching experience for me. And I got to understand NVIDIA better, as well as the roles within the company and how that works. So that was a really, really good tool that I highly encourage everyone to use. And it's an especially good way to get to know your company during a virtual world, since it's really easy to only talk to your coworkers when you need them. I encourage you to reach out and make a network outside of that. The next lesson is to identify your strengths and play to them. Your strengths can definitely be technical, like having a really deep understanding of hardware or networking concepts, or being an AI deep learning pro. As a college student studying engineering, I thought your strength working in a technical field had to be technical. And for me personally, this was a cause of anxiety. Coming into U of I had no computer science background other than the one class I took in high school, and there were definitely students at U of I that were stronger technically coming in. And this made me nervous to enter the tech industry at all. It wasn't until my NVIDIA internship last summer that I realized that this wasn't the case. After my final presentation, the vice president of hardware infrastructure, during a coffee chat that I set up with her, told me that one of my strengths was the ability to take technical concepts and present them in a way that was understandable to everyone, not just engineers. And I realized that somehow something that I'd been doing for myself to make CS digestible for me, and something that I had been perceiving as a weakness, had actually turned into a strength in the workplace. And I wouldn't have learned that if I hadn't worked with my team and my manager, who helped me recognize the importance of this in engineering. So work with your team and your manager, collect feedback to identify what strengths that you are bringing to the workplace, and that can help you figure out where you can best contribute and excel in your team. While identifying your strengths is extremely important, it's also important to recognize your fears and where they're coming from. The week before I started my internship at NVIDIA, I was so scared. I was worrying about various hypotheticals. What if I don't know what I'm doing? What if I don't know how to do my project? What if I can't figure out? And so on and so forth. And this fear of not knowing for me wasn't a positive or motivating feeling. It was driving anxiety. And even after my internship started, this fear was following me. What if today's the day I can't figure it out? And it was kind of like this imposter syndrome that was always in the back of my head. But I attended a talk for interns by the VP of Hardware Infrastructure, Sharon Clay. And during that talk, she said, "Every day I wake up not knowing how to do my job." And that quote has kind of stuck with me ever since. She talked about how that feeling that you're having of not knowing means that the role that you're currently in is one where you're being challenged and one where she's learning. She said that the day she feels like she knows how to do her job is the day she needs to figure out what's next. And so hearing that, it was validating to hear that someone that was so accomplished professionally not only faces this feeling like I did, but embraces it and treats it as an opportunity to acquire new skills and learn. And that was huge for me as a woman in a male-dominated tech industry. So this is still a work in progress, but I've been working on facing that feeling more than letting it turn into self-doubt. And I hope that this encourages others to do so as well. The fourth lesson I have is effective communication. Especially in a virtual world where you're sitting in your home, it's much harder to keep up with updating your team on progress and asking questions. Starting in August, I was definitely afraid of asking for help or asking questions virtually because while you're in work, you can just go out, knock on a cubicle and say, hey, can you help me for 5 minutes? And it's over. But virtually, it felt a little bit more intrusive. And I realized I was being very hesitant about that. And I realized it was not being productive. Instead, I learned how to ask good questions, asking specific questions rather than just saying, oh, this isn't working. Can you come take a look? I learned that I had to detail out what I've tried, the results of that effort, and break the larger question down into specific questions so my manager and my mentor could understand what's happening and is able to ask me with my question more effectively. Another thing is that asking questions doesn't have to be limited to the technical scope of your project. If you ask questions like who will be using your project? What are the use cases? What features are the most valued? What is the goal, purpose, or hopeful end result of your project? Having this big picture understanding will allow you to develop your project more effectively. And then with this big picture understanding of your project and the combined knowledge that you've gained from your coffee chat network, this might give you some ideas in solving some other problems or coming up with new strategies for your project. For example, I had a coffee chat once where I was talking about the work that I was doing on my team. And the person I was having a coffee chat with said, hey, we were having a really, really similar problem. How did you solve it? We're still working on it. And so from that conversation, I was able to hear what other teams had tried, what I had been working on, and we were able to come up with a better strategy in going at the problem for both of us. And so don't be afraid to speak up about those. You definitely have new insight and it's valued, and you should definitely share it. The last lesson I have for everyone is explore. I really encourage you to explore through your internships in your career. Like I said, I didn't know that I wanted to pursue CS until I actually came to U of I. And NVIDIA is really cool in that interns can return to different teams. You're actively encouraged to explore different teams throughout your internship by talking to different people. And this can help you figure out what you like to do and maybe what you don't. Working at a company that touches so many sectors like NVIDIA does is particularly cool because you can also try out different domains when you return as an intern or as full-time. So you can intern one time in hardware infrastructure and then return as an intern in maybe the self-driving car team. So that's kind of pretty cool, and it helps you figure out what you like to do or maybe what you don't like to do. The next thing I'd like to encourage you to explore is the community. You can join different clubs and community groups. At NVIDIA, for example, there's a women in tech group and an early career network group, for example. While you're working in person, you're surrounded by your work community, so it's a lot easier to feel it. But virtually, it's a lot harder to feel that kind of sense of camaraderie that exists within a workplace. And you can definitely build that through clubs and interest groups and also through company virtual events. I participated in a bunch of holiday drawing and painting nights in December, and I have zero artistic skills whatsoever, but it was still really fun to meet other NVIDIANs that I otherwise wouldn't have met or gotten to interact with. And the last thing is to make the most of your intern and new college grad groups to meet others that are in the same stage of their careers as you are. Before my internship, I was just perusing through the intern Facebook group when I saw I was actually looking for a roommate or someone to eat lunch with during my first week because I was scared of eating lunch alone. So I went ahead and messaged like 3 or 4 girls that I found in the Facebook group. And now I live with 2 of them. They're my roommates in California. And I'm really, really good friends with one of the other ones. So everyone else is waiting for someone to reach out. So I encourage you to be that person. It might be harder to make these connections virtually, but a friendly introductory Slack message can go a really, really long way because they're probably in the same boat as you. So those are my 5 lessons for my internship and career experience so far. There is a link that should be in the chat or is at the top of my slide deck to show that you can fill out. So NVIDIA, if you're interested in opportunities at NVIDIA, we can reach out to you. And I wanted to thank you so much for being here today. And I hope that you were able to take away a few things. I'd love to answer any questions if there are any. Thanks again.
All right, so we open questions for Vibha. If anybody has them, please type them in the chat. But I have a question for you. You mentioned how important coffee chats and speaking to different representatives in your time in NVIDIA and in college helped you sort of identify what you wanted to do and where you wanted to go, which ultimately ended up being at NVIDIA. So I just wanted to ask, do you have any suggestions for mustering up the courage to attend coffee chats and like speaking to someone from a company? Because I know from experience sometimes it can be a little intimidating and it is easier said than done. So if you have any advice for people who want to try and talk to someone, but it's hard for them to do so.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely one of those people. It helped that my manager kind of just set them up for me and didn't really ask. And I definitely would say that that was a really, really great opportunity. And I'm very thankful for my manager for doing that to me because it pushed me to put myself in those situations. But I will say that once you do the first coffee chat, it just takes practice. So that first one might be a little bit awkward, a little bit uncomfortable. You're trying to figure out what you need to ask, things like that. But the more you do it, the more practice you get, the easier that they become. So I definitely say just try to do it one time. And that kind of comes back to the third lesson of learning every day and putting yourself in a position where you might be a little bit afraid, a little bit uncomfortable, similar to literally to the lesson of I don't know how to do my job every day. It's a little bit similar to that where it's embracing that feeling a little bit or trying to embrace that feeling a little bit more. In terms of gaining confidence to do that, I would definitely suggest doing preparation beforehand. So preparing some questions beforehand so you're not trying to think of them on the spot is definitely helpful because then you go in with already you have something to ask. You're already prepared with some content going into it. So I think those are the two things. It definitely is very difficult, but once you do it the first one, the rest just get easier the more coffee chats you do, for sure.
We have another question for how has participating in the different orgs at NVIDIA and being at NVIDIA helped you realize new interests and where you want to go from here?
Sure. So for me personally, I interned in a hardware infrastructure team and I returned to the same team. So I didn't quite work in different teams because I came back to the same one. But for me, it was an exploration of interest through talking to different people. So I got to hear about the work they were doing. And I learned that, so initially I came in wanting to switch to a hardware or a healthcare team. So I was like, I'm very interested in working for NVIDIA Healthcare. This is the team that I want to learn and work on. And so I had coffee chats with a bunch of people that work in healthcare, and they described the different skill sets that you needed to have in order to join these teams. And I talked to a bunch of people on hardware infrastructure, and it seemed to me that they had really, really good projects and really, really good opportunities to build those skills that would get me potentially in the future if I wanted to work on a NVIDIA healthcare team. So it was cool to see my interests I had them aligned in a certain way that I thought was how I wanted to do it. And it was cool that doing these coffee chats and these explorations showed me a different path or maybe a better path to get there. I do have a lot of friends that tried out different teams. I know one person that I met at NVIDIA last summer, he interned for four times for 4 different teams. And one of the cool things about NVIDIA is that they're really open to doing co-ops. So you can do summer internships as well as fall and winter. And so there's really a lot of opportunities to come back and try different teams. So for me, I didn't personally work on different teams because I decided to come back, but it's definitely a possibility that you can you can work in different roles, work in different teams during different internships for sure.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Vibha. Thank you again. And we will be moving on to our next speaker, Shivani Gupta from Capital One. So
awesome. Thank you. Cool. All right. So I'm assuming you guys can see life at Capital One. The slide. Yep. Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for, giving me the opportunity to talk today. I've been loving the talks, as, even though I'm a speaker, I've learned so much from Elizabeth and Viva. And I will say this talk is not as cool as theirs. It's more informational, but I will be talking about, what I've done, my experience here, and it's very relevant for those looking for internships or jobs. So excuse me, I keep losing my voice today, so please excuse me if I have to mute myself and cough a little. But yeah, cool. So I'll just start off by introducing myself. So I'm Shivani. As Savera said, I'm a software engineer working out of the San Francisco office at Capital One, and I am in the TDP program. So if you've applied for Capital One at all, you might have heard of the TDP program. It basically stands for Technology Development Program, and it's basically a software engineering role for new grads, but it's in a 2-year rotational program. So the cool thing about this is that, you onboard onto a team just like any other engineer would, but you have this additional perk starting off with a cohort. And I graduated in spring of 2019 from University of Illinois, and I started my first job here in that program. And onboarding for us was actually in the main office in Richmond, which I'll talk a little more about after. And it was a 2-week, really cool onboarding process where I got to meet the 700 or so other TDPs who were all new grads from all across the world, starting in the various offices. And I also got to meet the 26 or 25 other San Francisco TDPs. So even though the whole class of TDPs was huge, my specific office had 26 people. So it was really cool to start off with this cohort who's starting their new grad journey together, and has this additional learning and development focus the first 2 years. So I guess I can also talk more about, what I kind of do. I think Savera touched on this a little in my blurb earlier, but I've mainly worked with backend my year and a half that I've been here on a team called Event Hub, and we have built a stream processing platform, which has been super fun for me. The entire tech stack when I joined was completely new. I've been coding in Scala, which is a functional programming language. So if we've got CS majors here, you guys take CS 421, I believe, and I think it's taught in Haskell, or it was before. I think they recently changed it. So that teaches you a bunch of functional aspects. I had forgotten most of it when I started my job, but there's that learning curve, which is hard in the beginning, but the mentorship on my team was awesome. And I've been coding in Scala, working with AWS on the cloud, and our platform is deployed on AWS Lambdas. So we work with serverless technology. If you haven't heard of Lambdas before, they're basically, you pay for what you use. So it takes care of standing up the infrastructure or the compute for you. You can just upload a jar or upload some code that you can run. And you just, as long as your function's running, you just pay for that. And I've also worked with some CI/CD deployment pipelines. So Jenkins is what we work with here. And finally, to deploy the infrastructure on AWS, we use Terraform on my team, which is basically an infrastructure as code, which basically means you write scripts to deploy, AWS Lambdas, maybe a DynamoDB table. So enough of that. Let me talk more about Capital One, who we are. So you guys might know that we're a bank, but we do like to call ourselves a tech company first. And Rich Fairbank, or Richard Fairbank, is our CEO who founded the company in 1994. And in this slide, you actually see of our various offices. I think these are almost all of them. So on the very left is our Richmond office. That's the campus that I mentioned I went to for onboarding. So let me check time here, 9:41. Okay. So basically, this is a huge campus. It's kind of like maybe Facebook in Menlo Park, where most TDP interns, which would be called the TIPs, which is the Technology Internship Program, or any other internship program. I'll talk more about those later. A lot of people like to pick this office because it is, one of the largest, and it's based, if you guys don't know where Richmond is, it's in Virginia. McLean is our headquarters, near Washington, D.C. So I haven't been there, but I think it's an hour or so from Richmond, also our big office. And then Plano is in Texas, this third picture here. And they also have a huge campus that I haven't been to. And then Chicago is actually a really cool office. So fun fact, I actually interned at the Capital One Research Park location my summer of 2017, summer after sophomore year. And I visited the Chicago office and it was so cool. They had like an indoor garden. They had a Ferris wheelchair just sitting on the 21st floor, which was really cool. So really cool office. Then we've got NYC and SF is this one, and then Boston, which I think is our more of the smaller office. But the difference between these offices, if you're wondering, is that typically, you will get to work with all kinds of technologies if you're coming in as a CS or a programmer, but the lines of businesses might be different. So, we do offer a bunch of different products. So we've got our Capital One credit card. We also, have a bank, so you can open a bank account with us, and some other lines of businesses that I won't really go into. But I work on an internal product, so I don't directly work. excuse me, I don't directly work on with any of these products, but I will be rotating to a different team, and I'll talk about the rotation process, where I will get to work with metadata that comes from card transactions, which I think is really cool. So, for example, there's a team which basically, if you swipe your Capital One credit card at Starbucks and it has some metadata associated with that transaction, like a name called SBX, that team extracts that data and makes it more meaningful, maybe the place and time of the transaction, stuff like that. So I'll get to learn more about, how they use that data, how they apply machine learning. I haven't learned that myself, so I'm excited to onboard onto that team. But the difference is that all offices don't necessarily have all these lines of businesses. So SF doesn't really have any teams that work directly on the card. We mainly have the site, which is the capitalone.com site, which a lot of teams work on. So yeah. So I guess if you're looking for internships and full-time opportunities, so far I've mentioned TDP, which is what I'm in, the Technology Development Program, but we do have a lot of other full-time programs. So if you're in stats or business and you're more interested in the business side, we've got something called MRP. So, we have this pattern of calling all our things development programs, but that's only because we really care about mentorship. But they are basically you starting as a data analyst or as a project manager in just the specific program. So if you want to code, I would highly recommend Technology Development Program. If somehow you're in this talk and you aren't actually in CS or ACE, there's also CODA, which is for people who are new to coding. And so the internships are basically the internship version of the full-time program. So we only hire rising seniors. So if you're in your junior year of college, you would apply for these internships. And the goal is, given you perform well, we obviously want you back. We want you to have that full-time offer. So these internships are only for rising seniors. But the Research Park internship that I did, I was a sophomore. So if you're a underclassmen, don't worry. I believe if they're hiring, that's a good fit. Cool. And for grad students, we have our data science program. Cool. So I did want to talk a little bit about diversity. How am I doing on time, Sabera? A few minutes?
You're fine.
Okay, cool. So, as Samara mentioned, I was involved with women in computer science on campus. At Capital One, in my team, I am the only woman on my team, and I was the youngest until last August, but never once did I think that I was treated differently just because, I was a woman. In fact, I've noticed that all my team members, no matter if they're males, they were constantly making space for me to talk. And if I were to say something and someone were to talk over me, I always noticed that I had this allies that they would be like, oh, Shivani was trying to make a point there. Or if I said something and then someone repeated what I said, someone else had my back and they said, oh, Shivani actually said the same thing earlier, which, kind of shows that, no matter if that person who talked over you meant to do that or not, there's always the support that I've found. And, a year and a half of me working here and from home since last March, I've constantly found that support. And I've noticed that in my team on the team level, but it's true for the entire company-wide level. So we really focus on attracting, people from all backgrounds and experiences. And I'm going to talk about our business resource groups. We actually had Malala Yousafzai recently talk, which since everything's virtual, it was a virtual event, but seeing her through a screen for Capital One, for a special event and just listening to her live was amazing. And it was made possible by one of our business resource groups, also known as BRGs. They're kind of like RSOs for U of I. So Origins is our Asian and Pacific Islander, you can say RSO, as it is at U of I, registered student organization. Within Capital One, we've got a lot of different groups that organize events. So they made that Malala Yousafzai event possible. We got to hear from such a motivational speaker. But going back to my point, we've got different groups that ensure that this culture is propagated, so you can find a place in anywhere in one of these groups if you wanted to. We've also got a group for LGBTQ community and for Blacks in tech. Actually, let me talk about tech resource groups if you guys are interested in specifically technical groups. This is for, everybody, the 50,000 employees or associates that we have. And we also have specific groups for people in tech. Of course, anyone can join. You don't have to be in tech, but Blacks in tech, women in tech, Hispanics in tech, even allies. There has been amazing groups of people that you can find. We also have this mindfulness chapter in San Francisco, which has been awesome. And in Women in Tech, I've attended lots of amazing talks from leadership. And also we started a book club recently where we read Rise by Patty Azzarello. So that was really cool to, come to a meeting and hear from other women reading a book written about, how to thrive in technology. So I kind of went all over the place there, but my point was there's various groups at Capital One which kind of ensure that, you feel like you belong. So here are some quick pictures that I wanted to show you guys. So on top of our business resource groups, we also did this thing called coders. So on the left here, you see, this is me, that's me. And this is actually Marianne, who is also a U of I alum. And we basically taught coding to middle school students in Chinatown in San Francisco. So, we changed schools every, you can say semester, but every fall, spring. And this is some pictures of our final day when they presented their projects. And they used the MIT App Inventor, but I know nowadays they're doing front end and building a website. So it was really cool to get involved and teach students. And this is a picture. You might be wondering, what is this? On the right here is a picture of something called a yurt. And basically the offices are really cool. And San Francisco has this yurt, which is basically a fancier tent where my team and I used to hang out. So we sat by the yurt. So we basically had, I guess, ownership over it. So these had more desks. And this is just to show that the office, I really miss it. And it was really fun to be there. Okay. Finally, I mentioned earlier the various internships and full-time opportunities. This is the TDP program. Basically, you get to experience 2 different roles. I'm rotating soon. I would have rotated in August, but because of COVID, my rotation was postponed to March. But the goal of the rotation is that you get exposure to 2 different teams. I wanted to do backend, so I preferenced a team that was still doing backend. But if you wanted to, you could even diversify the tech stack. And there's a strong focus of mentorship and learning within the program. So again, networking, a lot of mentorship, learning from leaders. And if you wanted to, you can explore various technologies. So the TIP is the internship version of the program. TDP program is 10 weeks long. And here you actually get paired with TDPs for the entire 10 weeks, and you get to talk with them every week. And you basically, so I actually was paired with 2 people, and I got to check in with them every week just to see how they were doing, be an informal resource. So the internship program really values that you get to build your network, you get to, get mentorship from a TDP, a manager, also mentor, tech mentor, so a lot of mentorship, and you get to work on a team and work on a project that's deployed to production. So I actually attended internship presentations at the end of the summer last year, and so many leaders would chime in and say, hey, how can we make sure that this project you worked on lives beyond your 10 weeks and it's deployed to production? So there's a huge emphasis on that, at least the group that I was part of, and I'm sure for the entire company. And finally, the interview is a one full power day where you have 3 different interviews: behavioral, technical interview, which has 2 to 3 coding questions, and a case interview, because we do value those analytical skills and business skills as well. So and you can talk to your recruiter more about, how to prep for these kinds of interviews. But it's one full day. It won't be a lot of back and forth from phone to, various different days, which are also really great, I think, but this is how we do it. So if you want to know more about that, I think reaching out to a recruiter is the best bet. Yeah, and this is our website. So I think that's it for me. Sorry if I went over time. I should have looked at when I started, but happy to take any questions. I know I kind of rushed through that. But yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Shivani. Does anybody have any questions for her or her experience at Capital One? I have a question from the comments. Somebody asked, how did you know in college you wanted to work for Capital One?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's actually a funny story. So I mentioned that I interned my summer after sophomore year, and that was actually my first internship ever. So, when you're in school, you're just looking to get some experience. You don't care where it is. And when I got the internship, I didn't really know what Capital One did. I had never had a Capital One credit card. But when I did the internship in Research Park, it's very unique in that you get paired with someone or a manager who's remote, most likely. So mine was based out of McLean, or the Washington, D.C. office. And what I noticed throughout the summer was that he was very invested in my growth. And that's something I really valued. Even beyond the 10 weeks for the internship, we were connected on LinkedIn, and he would reach out if someone from the Bay Area joined his team. That's where I'm from. That's where I'm based right now as well. And so he would always think of me when I was considering product management for HotSec. I reached out to him because he was a product manager and he was open to talk. So this entire time I noticed this emphasis on mentorship and being invested in your growth. And I just really like that. So I thought when I'm starting off my career, I wanted to be somewhere where I can grow. Because as long as I'm learning, I'm happy. And as long as I'm doing back end for now. But I'm very open to, I actually did a lot of front end in college. So I just wanted to do something different. And that's why I wanted to do back end. So when I got my full-time offer, I actually didn't return after summer 2017. I actually interned at a startup based in like the perception or the autonomous vehicle space after my junior year. So I didn't return as a Capital One intern, but then for full time, when I got the offer, I remembered how, what a great experience I had had in my internship, and I really wanted that. So that's how I kind of knew. I just knew that you kind of just have to look for what you're looking for. You just kind of have to think about what you're looking for. Is it a good team? Are you making an impact through your work? Or is it, mentorship that you're looking for? Like, what is it that you're looking for? And kind of based on that priority, find that fit. And I thought Capital One fit pretty well. And I remember debating between 2 places. And I think Capital One eventually I wanted to be in Silicon Valley and San Francisco. It all worked out pretty well for me. So hopefully that answers your question.
All right. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Shivani, again. And last but not least, we will have Ann Kyle from Caterpillar round out our lightning talks for today. So whenever you're ready, Ann.
Hi. Start this off. Okay. Can you guys see my screen? Okay.
Yep. Please.
Right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ann Kyle, and I'm a senior digital analyst at Caterpillar. And I wanted to thank Pulse for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to talk about Caterpillar, my career, and then how Caterpillar supports diversity and inclusion. So, you know, one of the things that a lot of folks talked to today was about the why, right? And to me, this is the slide kind of covers, at least especially the first sentence, the why that I've stayed with Caterpillar for over 15 years now. Really, it's the creating, building, problem solving, innovating, testing, and service and improvement. So there's a lot of them, right? But to me, that really what spoke was the building, the problem solving, and the improving. And that's been fundamentally what I've been able to do throughout my career in all the different product groups and service organizations that I've worked on. And that's what's going to be critical as you guys kind of navigate your career, is really aligning your why to the company or companies that you decide to stay with. So this is a lot of information, but there are a couple of things that I kind of want to walk through. Bare minimum, I want you guys to understand how Caterpillar is structured. We have 3 primary segments that cover construction industry. So you guys have probably seen our yellow equipment on as you're driving down the highway and they're improving the roads. You might have seen some of our pictures of some of our equipment at mine sites that represents the resource industry. And that first image from my opening slide, it's myself at a mine site almost 15 years ago, helping to build that, assemble that large mining truck on that site. And then the last one is energy and transportation. One of the cool things, if you guys walked around campus, and now, especially after working for Caterpillar for so long, I actually kind of hone in on these. There's actually a lot of CAT gensets supporting backup power in a lot of our different facilities at U of I and throughout the world. Actually, it's really cool to see, you know, if you go to some of the hospitals, they serve as backup generators. When there's a disaster, you'll see Caterpillar equipment and generators helping get the community back up and going. The other piece, to me, one of the critical parts of working at a company is the folks that you work with day in, day out, right? All of this success that Caterpillar has enjoyed would not have been possible without the folks that are been there day in, day out. So we have over 2,000 employees globally, and they're located in about 150 locations in 25 countries. Now, the reality is I've been working from home for the last year. So majority of the folks are working from home and probably will continue to do so for a while. But what I've learned is that, you know, our solutions have to work in every part of the world, right? Right now, I came out of engineering, and I'll talk a little bit more about my career next, but now I work in the dealer space. And the fascinating thing is the solutions that you think are the forefront of technology in North America or Europe oftentimes does not work in Africa or Asia. And sometimes they've leapfrogged, right? And how can we leverage some of those learnings to help other parts of the world that may be considered ahead? The last part, or one of the last parts that I want to talk through is, to me, it's really cool to see our machines. So I love traveling, and I've seen a motor grader in the middle of nowhere in Iceland, or seeing, you know, on the side of the road, parts of an really old actually another motor grader too, that has been in service for over 50 years. And so we actually have over 4 million assets worldwide that is still working. And of that, over 1 million of them is connected and sending out information daily. And the group that I work with specifically now is figuring out how do you take all this data and provide insights for our end customer who's trying to make things, build things, right? And then the last piece I wanted to share in this from this infographic is the Caterpillar Foundation, which I'll share a little bit more on the latter part of the presentation. To me, the fact that my whys really align with the foundation's work continues to encourage me to work for the company, right? So you're always wanting to figure out what is it that you're doing day in, day out. Every day, you're not going to be doing the most exciting, most awesome thing. But as long as you can see the work that you're doing is contributing to what you think the world should be, I think that's what encourages me every day. And I'll share a little bit about that in a bit. So this is another big chart. And, I was going to actually walk through all of this, and I know we're pretty much out of time. But the thing that I want you guys to take away from this is your career is not going to be linear. It's going to be, especially for someone like me, and I think a couple of the other speakers honed in on this, is that I love to learn. I love to try out new problems, work in new areas. I don't want to be bored. I want to, every day, I want to feel like I've finished the day picking up something new or learning something new about the world. And I think that my career with Caterpillar enabled me to do that, right? I got the chance to go more deeper into one particular area, which is structural simulation. And I spent a lot of a good portion of my career thus far in that area, in engineering, getting test data in the middle of nowhere from our machines that are running at 40 miles an hour, carrying 400 tons in minus 10 degrees, and taking that data set to build structural models that help us improve our products. To going and seeing how dealer in Dubai functions and what are the challenges that he faces. So I got to see the different ways that Caterpillar makes an impact in the world. And the other piece I would also say is my education has also been kind of parallel to that, right? I kind of leverage education to kind of step to the next position. I wanted to do everything and know everything, but it was almost like, when I first started my career, I wasn't 100% sure where I was going to go. Did I wanted to go get a PhD, go really, really deep in an area? And I think going into the workforce and seeing different opportunities helped me to kind of cater my educational path to reflect what I felt like the things that I needed to be successful in my career. So I was fortunate to spend a lot of time in engineering, and then also pivoted more towards business with my MBA a couple of years ago. And then the last piece I would say too is, and a couple of the other folks talked about the development program. So I did join Caterpillar through a rotational run program, but I also, when I made the pivot, I'd say about 4 years ago, I leveraged another development program that was there. And mind you, it was just kind of an opportunity that Caterpillar had opened up for folks that have already been in the company for a while. But that helped me to kind of test out some parts of this new area that I wanted to explore and still kind of progress in my career. And so I'm going to pivot a little bit more towards some of the diversity and inclusion initiatives. Now, this has a lot of statistics, right? But one of the areas I do want to hone in on, and it's similar to what the previous speaker talked about, was we call it the employee resource groups. But and we have about 14 of them. And to me, these groups, and every company will have it. You'll see this. We'll see a lot of, there's going to be a lot of similarities, because at the end of the day, what all companies are trying to do is help you to see yourself working for that company, hopefully for the long time, right? And to me, what the resource groups have done is figure out, in different parts of my career when I was struggling with some challenges, going to the group, looking at different programs that was available through the group, leveraging those to kind of help me progress in my career. And the other part of it too was really understanding groups that I wasn't necessarily self-identifying as part of. I think that's also very critical as you're trying to make an impact to the world. There's a lot of people that don't have a voice, right? But then how do you advocate for them? And that self-education also was enabled because there are all these other, these groups actually welcome you, even if you're not part of the group, to help you to understand some of the challenges that those groups are facing. And then the last piece, and I have to put a gratuitous picture of my daughter, but I think after having her, the work that I do at Caterpillar has become even more clear, especially honing in on the work that the Caterpillar Foundation has done. As was mentioned in the introduction, I'm really passionate about STEM education. To me, I heard many people tell me many things about being a woman and women in tech, women in engineering, and luckily there were organizations that, especially once I got to college, that said no. Like, there's lots of different stories. There's lots of different people that pursue STEM. You don't have to be this standard stock, right? And these organizations have really helped me to stay in STEM, because there were some times I was like, is this the right thing for me, right? But there's so many resources that were made available, especially with SWE, that I've leveraged throughout my career in college, and then especially as I joined the workforce. And the other piece of it is about pulling up the next generation, right? And you guys are, all you guys are very early in your career, but I also challenge you. You guys are in college. There are folks in, there are kids in high school, middle school, kindergarten. I mean, there's so many statistics about when children stop, wanting to be interested in STEM. One of the coolest things for me is, like, my daughter loves to play with Legos, but I'm worried that by the time she enters school, everybody's going to be like, hey, why are you playing with Legos? You should be playing with dolls, or whatever messaging she gets, right? Now, if she does choose to pursue STEM, then I want to make sure it's an easier path for her than it was for me. And the other part of the reason I love this picture is my husband and I love to camp and hike. And right now we haven't done any of that really. So this is one of the last pictures of her being outdoors early last year. And to me, I'm super excited about sharing what the world is will be offering to her, right? Learning about the world through her eyes. So I think that's the other piece that I really connect with in terms of the foundation's work, is that they're looking to ensure that the infrastructure is in place, that we have water protection in place, ensuring that people have access to clean water, and then encouraging the employees to go ahead and work for these initiatives through matching funds, through giving us a volunteering day. There's many opportunities that Caterpillar in general has recognized that our employees are what is going to help make the world a better place. So I know it's much quicker because I knew we were kind of out of time, but on the career part, I didn't dive too much into the different opportunities, but I did want to put that up there. Internships, full-time positions. We are going to be at Corporate Connections next week, I think, is when Corporate Connections is, and then we'll be at the Engineering Career Fair. So tons of, internship opportunities and full-time positions we're still hiring for. So that was fairly quick. Let me know if you guys have any questions.
All right, there's a question that was said to me about you spoke on making the future for your daughter easier than it was for you. So besides your the way you mapped out your education, what other sort of challenges or changes did you experience, or did you have to tough through in order to get where you are today?
Yeah, I think a lot of people were surprised that I was where I was, right? I remember one of the experiences I had many years ago. Actually, it was actually not even an internship. It was like a company visit. Somebody told me like, "Oh, you're a girl. You'll be fine. You'll find a job in engineering." But what made me so mad was that, at that time, like getting into engineering, and I went to school at U of I, right? It's one of the top programs. I had the academics to get me there, and it wasn't because of, because I was a woman that got me there, but the fact that he thought that kind of made me frustrated, and I didn't know what to say, right? Because I think I was at that point like a sophomore in college, and so these subtle things that people tell you, and then you think, okay, I don't see a lot of folks in this. I don't see a lot of people like me in terms of personality, in terms of how I look at the world, and what are the different things that I want to do with my career in a particular area. It kind of discourages you. But what I'm really excited to see, especially I'd say in the last 5 years, is all these different stories that are being told, right? Different pathways that people have taken and being successful. So that's what I'm hoping to share with my daughter, is saying, hey, you don't have to, she doesn't have to go to STEM, even though I would love her to. But if you do, you don't have to, follow a particular mold. You can kind of build the career that you want, the life that you want, because there are lots of different examples already out there for you.
All right, well, that is wonderful. Does anybody have any final questions for any of our speakers from any company from today? All right, it does not look like it. Well, thank you to everyone, all of our wonderful speakers today, for sharing their experiences at their various different companies. And we loved hearing about every unique experience, and hopefully learning some valuable lessons on how to, gain an internship in the and then continue on into industry. So thank you once again, and a little virtual round of applause. So thank you everyone for coming. And that concludes today's Lightning Talks.